Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chairman, may I first of all add my own congratulations to those you've already received on your re-election to the presidency of this chamber. Chairman, in response to an invitation by the Serbian authorities, the Congress decided to observe local and regional elections being held in Serbia on the 6th of May 2012. It was my pleasure to be appointed head of delegation and rapporteur, particularly as I've been a member of the delegation sent by the Congress to observe the previous similar elections in 2008, as had certain other members of our delegation. And this gave us an excellent opportunity to assess progress since then. I'm grateful for the assistance provided by Renata Zsigmund and her team, especially Jane Dutton-Earley, who's sitting beside me this morning, and also by the Council of Europe staff in their Belgrade office. I was also very pleased to have two members of the EU Committee of the Regions in the delegation, one of whom, Vaino Halikmägi from Estonia, will be speaking here today. The 2012 elections differed from the earlier ones I mentioned in one major respect. For the first time, 3 elections at local, parliamentary and presidential level were held concurrently throughout Serbia. The presidential election was brought about by the president shortening his mandate in the approved term, which proved to be for him a fatal miscalculation as he lost. On the same day, elections were also held at regional level in the autonomous province of Vojvodina. This meant that in some places, up to 7 votes took place simultaneously. So it's no wonder that Election Day was being called Super Sunday. In advance of Super Sunday on the 6th of May, I headed a pre-election mission of 5 members who traveled to Belgrade from the 17th to the 19th of April in order to prepare for our main mission, which was carried out from the 3rd to the 7th of May. Then we deployed our full delegation of 13 members to meet with stakeholders in Belgrade for several days before deploying throughout the country in 7 teams to meet with candidates in vibrant and lively exchanges and to observe the elections. My report carries fuller details of our programs. During our preparatory meetings, we heard that several new laws having an impact on elections had been passed within the previous year. These welcome additions included a law on financing political activities, as well as one setting up a new anti-corruption agency. In addition, a new law had been passed on the Unified Voters Register, meaning that in these elections, for the first time, voters were able to verify in one comprehensive internet list their inclusion in the electoral registers and to identify their local polling station. Now I would like to focus on the election day itself and the observations made by our members. All delegation members reported that, except for some isolated incidents, the elections were carried out in a calm and orderly manner. The polling stations managed remarkably well, considering the number of ballot papers that they had to deal with, and for this reason, some polling stations were late opening. It was also clear that the smaller polling stations were challenged by a lack of space, particularly where regional elections were added to the 3 national elections. Overcrowding was not helped by the practice in Serbia of including practically all of the observers in an extended polling board, which can reach up to 40 people sometimes. This issue is the subject of one of our recommendations, which I'll come to later. On the other hand, observers essentially represent political parties and candidates, and there were disappointingly few domestic observers present at the polling stations we visited. We were also concerned about the secrecy of the vote. As cardboard cross separations are still being used in most of Serbia instead of full polling booths, these very often are set at child-sized tables, since polling stations are often situated in local school premises. So voting preferences can easily be discovered by anyone wishing to do so. In certain areas, it was clear that minority groups, and in particular the Roma, were vulnerable to electoral malpractices such as controlled voting and vote buying. The current economic climate means that we have to be extra vigilant on these issues. Concerning women's participation, we were pleased to see that every 1 in 3 candidates to stand for election was indeed a woman, as the practice of blank resignations that had been used at previous elections in Serbia was not allowed this time. This also meant that women had a better chance of actually taking office. Our overriding impression at the end of polling day was similar to that at the beginning, that in organizational terms, it was ambitious to try and manage so many ballots on one day, and this was particularly evident when it came to the count, where, because the presidential and parliamentary elections were counted first, the local elections often didn't start until the not so early hours of the morning. But we also concluded that in terms of the issues at stake, local issues were largely overshadowed by national issues, and the race for president was, naturally enough, the issue that most excited the media. In relation to the media, we would also like to point out the importance of safe working conditions for journalists, with a particular emphasis on local journalists who were considered by our interlocutors to be the most vulnerable. All of these preoccupations that I've mentioned have informed our recommendations to the Serbian authorities. These are to revise the practice of including all interested parties in the local polling boards and consider instead introducing a system of accredited domestic observers, to refine the newly introduced single unified voters register, in particular to remedy inconsistencies in voters' lists in the southern part of the country where there were some problems in this regard, to increase transparency in party and media financing, and to ensure the enforcement of anti-corruption measures, not least by the newly formed anti-corruption agency, to address the issue of infringement of the secrecy of the vote due to the equipment at polling stations, and to use in future proper polling booths instead of cardboard separations at tables in all polling stations. Of course, there are other matters of concern affecting local government which are mentioned in our report, including problems involving the Albanian minority in southern Serbia and the Bosniak minority in the Sanjak of Novi Pazar. Many of these issues were moving positively under the previous government, and it is to be hoped that progress will continue under the new government, which emerged from the presidential and parliamentary elections. Naturally, the Kosovo issue remains the great unsolved but largely unspoken question in Serbia today, and no easy solution presents itself. Whilst being aware of the severe financial situation, we also point out how difficult it is for local authorities to carry out their tasks effectively when transfers from national authorities are so drastically reduced. We also suggest that in future local elections are held on separate dates so that local issues are given an effective platform. To conclude, Mr. Chairman, since my participation in the election mission to Serbia in 2008, several of the recommendations made then have subsequently been acted upon by the Serbian authorities. In particular, blank resignations have been abolished, and this has resulted in a far better identification of local leadership, and marked improvements have been made in the election process. I very much regret that for the reasons that were explained to us at the beginning of the plenary session yesterday, there is no Serbian delegation here today to respond to this report. I find it awkward to be discussing a country whose representatives are not present in the chamber. Nevertheless, I look forward to answering any questions and listening to any points on the report that members wish to make. Chairman, I submit the report and recommendations for the approval of the chamber. Thank you very much.
Merci à notre ami Nigel. Ce rapport, naturellement, est accompagné de 2 projets de résolution et de recommandations qui seront soumis au vote. Mais nous avons ici aujourd'hui, Nigel Mermagen vous l'a dit tout à l'heure, nous avons un de nos collègues du comité des régions de l'Union européenne. Vous savez que depuis un certain temps, nous avons un accord entre notre congrès du Conseil de l'Europe et le comité des régions de l'Union européenne pour que, au moment des observations d'élections, des collègues du comité des régions puissent venir avec nous pour améliorer la connaissance du terrain et pour leur donner aussi à eux, au comité des régions, quelques renseignements sur ce qui se passe dans certains pays dont certains sont candidats à l'adhésion à l'Union européenne et donc vous voulez avoir quelques éléments. Je vous donne donc maintenant la parole, Monsieur Vaino Alikmaji. J'espère que je ne me suis pas trompé. Vous pouvez parler de votre place ou vous pouvez venir au pupitre comme vous voulez.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, let me first of all thank you for this kind invitation to participate in this debate on behalf of the delegation of EU Committee of the Regions. A special thanks that I am first time in Strasbourg, I am first time here in Congress. The Committee of Regions, just as the Congress, is committed to fostering democracy and the rule of law at the grassroots level, both in the EU member states and the neighbouring countries. In fact, the Committee of Regions is the only EU body observing elections at local and regional level, be it with very moderate means. Therefore, the cooperation between our institutions in the field of election observation is very important. As the Committee of Regions Bureau has pointed out when adopting consolidated rules for the Committee of Regions' involvement in election observation missions in February this year. Those new rules also provide for the participation of a Committee of Regions member in the pre-election mission. I had the privilege to participate in that pre-election mission, and it was extremely helpful to better understand the situation in the country before the actual election day. As my dear colleague Nigel Mermagen already pointed out, the overall conduct of the elections took place in an overall calm and orderly manner in mostly well-organized polling stations. We also saw improvements in the legal framework and electoral system in Serbia. As was also mentioned, the fact that the local elections were held concurrently with parliamentary and presidential elections, both organizational as well as political challenges at the local level. For me, as a Committee of Regions member, this is especially interesting since we are currently working on an opinion of sanctioning EU citizens' rights, and in particular electoral rights within the EU. In this context, we have also discussed whether it could make sense to hold elections for different levels of governance on the same day in order to increase the turnout of elections. Experiences from our members on the effects for local politics vary in this respect. However, in Serbia, it was obvious that national debates overshadowed local issues. In its annual opinion on the EU candidate countries, the Committee of Regions noted the progress made in Serbia, but also drew attention to the importance of further developing democratic procedures, minority and local government rights, and development of civil society. Work on the next opinion in this regard has started, and I am sure that the rapporteur, Luc van der Brande from Belgium, will take these findings of the election observation mission into account for his report. We will also make sure that our working group on the Western Balkans can benefit from the insights this mission provided. The Committee of Regions members' own report will be presented to the members of our Civics Commission in one of its coming meetings, and I gladly take the opportunity to invite the head of delegation, Nigel Mermagen, to that meeting. Thank you once again for the good cooperation, and thank you for your attention.
Merci, merci monsieur, et vous transmettrez aussi au Comité des régions tout l'intérêt que nous prenons à être mutuellement sur les mêmes sujets quand ils nous intéressent ensemble. Merci beaucoup. Dans la discussion générale, j'ai eu 3 inscriptions. On ne prendra que ces 3. Monsieur Georgi Ilès, pour 3 minutes maximum.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President, our dear colleagues, firstly, I would like to thank you for the rapporteur, Nigel Mermagen, for this excellent report, and I would like to thank you, Renate Zygmunt and Jane Dutton early from the Secretariat for their work. I am convinced that the report properly shows a clear picture about the elections and the surrounding situation in Serbia at that time. Some of our colleagues who took part both the previous and this current election noted that positive development on election system in Serbia. Unfortunately, the Serbian delegation are not able to take part in this session, but I think that our colleagues in Serbia would say yes to the report. Last, let me share with you a positive experience in connection with the election. I was one of the members of the observation mission. We were on a region or a district where the majority of the population was Roma people, and it was good to realize that on some of polling stations the Roma people was participated on the election committee, and even the head of the polling station was a member from the Roma population. Thank you very much for.
Merci. Nous allons entendre maintenant M. Henri Ferral pour 3 minutes et ensuite se prépare M. Gulewski pour la 3e intervention.
Monsieur le Président, merci de me donner la parole. Cher Nigel, cher ami du Comité des régions, j'étais également membre de cette mission d'observation en Serbie et compte tenu du nombre important d'élections ce jour-là, de l'étroitesse des bureaux de vote, je voudrais par ces propos renforcer ceux du rapporteur, notamment sur ces 2 points. En effet, excusez-moi. Je voudrais renforcer les propos du rapporteur sur ces 2 points. En effet, il me semble opportun d'avoir des locaux plus spacieux, adaptés à des configurations d'hommes et non pas forcément d'enfants ou de classe maternelle. Et surtout, l'un étant lié aussi, et surtout de séparer ces élections du niveau local et des élections du niveau national, car les buts poursuivis ne sont pas les mêmes et les élections nationales estompent les locales, réduisant ainsi leur intérêt, cause certaine de démobilisation potentielle de l'électorat. Enfin, je voudrais aussi remercier l'équipe technique qui a encadré, de la part du Congrès, qui a encadré ces élections. C'est tout, Monsieur le Président.
Merci Henri Ferral. La parole est maintenant à Monsieur Gulevski de Russie.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Огромное спасибо докладчику за хорошее и конструктивное выступление. Мы вместе с вами должны поблагодарить и сербскую сторону вот за эти выборы. Они были крупномасштабные, они прошли во всех муниципалитетах страны. Наверное, это не так просто было, но они прошли на достаточно высоком и политическом, и организационном уровне, с хорошей явкой избирателей. А замечания были, и докладчик об этом сегодня говорил, но они не повлияли на окончательные результаты этих выборов. Поэтому я уверен, что вместе с нами следующие местные выборы в Сербии пройдут, наверное, без подобных замечаний, о которых мы сегодня говорим. Спасибо.
Merci. Cher ami Nigel Mermagen, est-ce que vous avez des choses à dire aux trois intervenants?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just first of all, thank colleagues for their supportive remarks. If I could just refer briefly to what Mr. Ferral was saying regarding combining elections. I think there are obviously advantages and disadvantages. The advantages in having all elections together on one, as it was in Serbia, Super Sunday, was probably an increased turnout at local level because of the heightened interest and publicity for the presidential election. And also, of course, economies of scale, saving of money, to put it bluntly, by only having one election day. The disadvantages, on the other hand, are that local issues naturally get overshadowed in most cases, apart possibly from some of the very large cities where mayoral elections are at stake. And the other main disadvantage is the length and complication of the process, particularly at the counting stage, which means that the count can drag on for many, many hours before all the elections are counted. But on balance, Mr. Chairman, I personally favour and think that local democracy is better served by having separate local elections and municipal and regional elections wherever possible, and that financial considerations should not dominate over local democracy. Thank you very much.
Merci à notre rapporteur.